Hey, listeners. In the last couple of episodes, I've talked about the benefits of CBUSA, the leading group purchasing organization in construction. We're gearing up here in Minneapolis for an annual builder event called The Summit, September 22nd through September 25th. It'll be in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This event, formerly known as the Power 30, is CBUSA's biggest event of the year. CBUSA members from across the country will come together to learn and engage in networking opportunities like face-to-face meetings with top brands and reps, interactive breakout sessions with fellow builders, and an exclusive vendor expo showcasing the latest materials. I'm excited to attend, and I'm excited to be recording a podcast episode in front of a live audience. Fellow home builders, if you want to be a part of this too, then head over to cbusa.us/learn today. Learn more about CBUSA's benefit and apply for a membership at cbusa.us/learn. Additionally, if you'd like to hear more, I interviewed Ryan Lipchek from CBUSA on episode 26 of the Curious Builder Podcast. Welcome to the Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host, and today is Thursday's Q&A. So all these questions have been submitted either through Instagram, direct email, or sometimes at our live events, we will request questions prior to a panel. And so every Thursday, I try to take 20 minutes and answer 2 questions. So this question was submitted a couple of months ago, right before one of our live events that we called Build Buzz. And there was Brad Levitt, Nick Schiffer, Morgan Molitor, Tyler Grace, and myself. And the question that came up that we actually didn't make the final question list, but I'll take it now, was how is everyone on this panel so comfortable being on camera all the time? And I think that's a great question. And I think there's a lot of different layers to it. Obviously, I can only speak for myself and not the others that were on that panel that day with me. But I think a big part of it is being comfortable with yourself. I think we obviously live in an age where we see a ton of social media and some people are more comfortable with it than others. But I think a lot of it just takes practice. I'm thinking just why this memory comes to me. I remember I was a swimmer in high school and I was extremely uncomfortable. I didn't start swimming until I was in 10th grade. And I remember joining the swim team. And obviously with the Olympics going on, we all know that you swim in a Speedo. But I remember thinking like, I am basically naked in front of the world. And I actually attribute a lot of my confidence to swimming. Within about 60 days, I was so used to walking around the pool deck in a Speedo that I honestly pretty much have been so body comfortable my entire life because of it. And now as a parent of 3, oddly enough, I have a girl and 2 boys. Swimming is actually something really important that my boys would do. Now, whether they want to pursue it or not, I'll see if they have a passion for it or not, like I did. But a big part of it was just being comfortable with who I was. And it's funny that I think of that now because I was not planning on talking about that. And many out there are probably a little nervous now. I think maybe I'll show up to a job site in a Speedo. But I think the point is just self-confidence. And I think if you can I speak a lot about it on the podcast about being authentic and being true to who you are. And when you sort of discover that, then whether the camera's on you or not, in some way, it doesn't matter. And so for me, I'm just very comfortable in my own skin. And I think that comfort level comes out when I talk to people. It allows me to interview people that are way smarter than I am, way more accomplished, because I'm just curious in who they are. And because you're sort of comfortable with who you are, you can just have a nice conversation. And so I guess that's how I would answer the question. How am I comfortable on camera? I think practice too. I mean, I don't think on day one you become comfortable with something. You could, it's very much like maybe running. If you're going to train for a marathon, the first couple of weeks of training are going to be a little rough. You are not going to be comfortable running 10, 15 miles at a time. I think you have to build up to it. And I think one thing that social media does kind of well is, because our attention span is so short, we do take short videos. So, if you don't get it right, people's memories are so short that they probably forget a bad performance. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think the biggest advice that people have given me over the years is, just hit record and figure it out. Personally, I do a lot better on the fly than I do with a planned script. That's not for everybody, but I think part of it is it allows you to maybe shake out the bugs and just kind of, be natural. And I think the more comfortable you are, sort of speaking off the cuff, I think the easier it is to be on camera. At least that's how I would answer the question. Now I kind of want to ask the rest of the group how they would answer the question. But I think if you're looking to get comfortable, practice makes perfect, as they say. So I would just start practicing. And I think sometimes we can be our own worst critic. It's not that we shouldn't reevaluate how we speak or how we talk or how we record, because there's obviously things that we can do better. Like purposely, I listen to my own recordings, try to say less. I'm not doing a very good job, but I am trying. I'm aware of it. And I think there's a healthy part of where we can do some self-reflection. I also think that asking peers around you, what do you think of that? I have people on our team and even personally where maybe before I post a video, I'll say, hey, would you take a look at this for me? Do you think this is my message? This is my intent. And, most of the time it hits the marks, but sometimes people are like, no, it'd be better if you re-record it. So I think if you are going to put something out there that, maybe is more of a branding piece that really speaks to who you are, sure, you can certainly give it a couple takes and really make sure you nail it. And I think for like story posts on Instagram or something a little bit more casual, I think just practice is probably the most important thing, and you'll discover your own voice. This episode is brought to you by Alpine Hardwood Flooring. They've been our partner now for over a decade, installing all our wood floors on all our new homes as well as our remodels. And on a personal level, Adam and Anthony Jankala, the owners, are just absolutely amazing people. They've been so supportive of my career as well as doing anything we need to make sure that our clients are happy. And they work so well with our other vendors and trade partners at not only protecting their product, but also ensuring everyone else's looks great. So if you're looking for a wood floor or for a refinish, I highly recommend Alpine Hardwood Flooring. The second question was, in years 1 to 3 of your business, how did you create a niche in the market while not turning away work? That's a really good question. I imagine the person asking this question wants to be known for something or wants to have a niche. And I'm thinking, of two that I guess that come to mind as I knew a builder once. This was back in the 70s and 80s, that he only built 2 stories, and his brother only built single stories, and that was their niche. So if you built 2 stories, you went to one brother, and if you built a single story, you went to the other brother. Just kind of a silly differentiator, but that's how they basically segmented who would build with who. I think understanding what you want to do and understanding what your clients want, sometimes they align and sometimes they don't. And I think that's what this question is really speaking to. I think if you really want to focus on something, like maybe you really want to focus on just high-end architecture work, and so you just want to work for architects, I think that's great. I think it's a great business model. However, if somebody comes to you and says, I would really like you to build my home, and it's not something you're really excited about, but you don't have any other architecture jobs going on right now, like you might have to build that house to kind of keep your company afloat. And so I think every business owner can sort of relate to taking jobs that might not be in the center of their brand, but they're still on target. I mean, you're still hitting the target. And I'm much more aware of that today than I was previously. And I don't think there's a perfect answer for this, because one of the things I'm really passionate about that I think coincides with this perfectly is identifying the ideal client. And I think that's hard because when you're really busy and you have a lot of your clients that are kind of, you're in sync with them and you look what's coming down the pipeline, it's easier to be a little bit more selective because you're busy. As those start to dry up, if you're a new home builder, you might start looking at remodeling. And, if you're at remodeling, maybe you do bigger projects, maybe you do $500,000 on up projects, but you might have to look at a couple $250,000 projects to kind of keep the meter flowing. And I also think that you really need to know your numbers. This is not something that I've done a good enough job in earlier on in my career, where, I would take small, medium, I would take all kinds of projects if it seemed like it was a good fit. But that was really just based on a feeling. And I don't think that's the best way to make that decision. I think it can be a factor, but I don't think it should be your only one or your main one. And so, like, for right now, I would say that we've been definitely experiencing a lull in the market. We've had a couple bigger projects that have been put on hold or canceled. And so right now we don't have as much under construction as I would like. We have a lot of people, I think, sort of waiting on interest, waiting on the election, at least where I am. And so I've always been a part of remodeling. I think it kind of flows 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, just kind of depends year in, year out. So right now we've picked up some good remodels. And now there's one that I'm looking at that went from, I think it was going to be like a $500,000 remodel, and they want to cut it down to 200. and I have to make the decision whether I want to take that job or not. I I want to take the job because right now we could definitely do it. But if it takes, a month or two to kind of spin up and it takes a couple months to get into it, but I miss out on a bigger job because of it, was that a good call? And can I really be profitable at that smaller price point? I think I'm not sure how smaller remodelers do it that do, and I know there's a lot that are successful. They probably just charge, a lot more margin would be my guess, but they're doing bathrooms or they're doing, screen porch addition. And, maybe they're self-performing labor would be my guess as well. So you've got, your carpenters and your trimmers, maybe your tile setters on staff. And so, you need to take on jobs to keep them busy to pay the overhead. And if you have the capacity to do it, then it makes sense. I know that there are some companies, trimmers in particular, that when they are a little slow, they'll send out kind of a mass email or a mass text and say, hey, I've got, 4 trimmers that are available for 2 weeks. Does anyone have work for them? And that is kind of the con of trying to have, if your staff too big, how do you keep that overhead, but yet balance? You don't want to commit to something too much so that you miss out on something. So I don't know. That's a tough question because I don't know of the perfect way to do it. I do know that if you are really passionate about your sorry, if you're really passionate about your niche, I think it'll show up. I think you'll start attracting more and more clients, to what you do. There's a company that comes to mind called the Concrete Pig. And I ran into him. I don't know his first name right off the top of my head, but everything he builds is out of concrete. Beautiful work, incredible work. And he's created a niche in just around concrete. I don't know for a fact he'd actually be a phenomenal person to bring on the podcast to ask him if he's ever, been asked to do a few other things. But, he's known for concrete. That's his niche. I think there are certain builders that, only work with certain styles, as we've already talked about. I think there are certain painters, for instance, that do really high-end faux work. Or I'm thinking of my plaster guy who can kind of do a little bit of everything. And what would he like to be known for? He probably wants to do really high-end plaster work. And I think if your niche gets too specific, then you sort of have to have either a really deep line of clientele or become very exclusive in the fact that there just isn't many people that can do your skill set, which I think is obviously, very fortuitous for that business owner. Or you're going to have a few options that, when things are slower, you're going to have to branch out a little bit. But I don't think you ever want to lose sight of that niche. And I know certain architects that, and I think they do a much better job of controlling their brand than most builders that I've met. And for a long time, that was myself. I mean, I think I would, anytime I built a home, anytime I remodeled a home, I would post that home on our website. And then a branding strategist, pointed out to me one time, why are you advertising work that you don't necessarily want to seek in the future? That we should be advertising the work we want to do. We should be showcasing the work that we are not only proud of, but that the work that we want to repeat and grow from. And it's not that I'm embarrassed of any work I've ever done. I'm very proud of anything we've done, whether it be a small deck early in my career or a screen porch or a fireplace remodel or whatever it was. I've been building for 20 years. So there's a lot of projects we've taken on over the years that it doesn't fit what we are today. And I would say for myself, I'd say our niche has always been high quality. And I think the benefit of a niche being high quality, high touch, high customer service is that it doesn't matter if the project is large or if the project is small. I can still sort of fit into my niche of just being high quality. I've often mentioned that, I've really just gone where my clients wanted me to go because my niche was really just doing high-end work and doing it really well. And I look back at some of the homes I built, 8, 10 years ago, and some of the same craftsmen that I use today, I used then. So the quality really hasn't changed. The quality was very good. It's just that the designs, the size, the materials we're using are much higher end on top of inflation. And so the home as such is perceived to be a much better value. But I think if I went back to my clients, 15, 20 years ago, they would all say that, there were other cheaper options out there than me. However, they were attracted to us because of our quality. Specifically, I've always kind of had a passion towards cabinetry and woodwork. And that comes out in my sales proposition. That comes out in the way I talk about, the trades. I'm very loyal to, my tradespeople, I love them. I think they do an amazing job. And so I really want to celebrate the work that they do and the work that I'm passionate about. And I think the client can see that. It could also be your design. So your design team. So it's also kind of fun to, I'm probably more open to other styles, and because my niche is not a specific style. I think I really like being creative, and I really love working with creative designers and architects that can really do anything. So I wouldn't want, my limits of imagination to limit a project that I would take on. I'm really excited about things that are new. Frankly, what do they say, that the most constant change is change, and so I love variety. I love change. I recently was, on a podcast, and I think I had just mentioned that as long as a client was willing to pay me for my work, I didn't care if we were doing a really high-end sauna, or, a small little ADU, or a large home. It really wouldn't matter to me if it was the right client and the right design, and they were willing to pay us for our quality. I just get excited about unique projects and doing good work. I mean, even a slide. I mean, last year I worked with Drew Beeson, and he's a local talent here in Minnesota, does incredible artistic work with acrylics and all kinds of different resins that I don't have the knowledge to speak about. And we built a slide for my kids, and I wanted to be really unique. And man, I was more jazzed about that silly slide than I have been about many things I've done. And I think it's just because it was really high quality. It was really unique. And so I think you can balance your niche and not turn away work, but you have to be mindful of it. And I would tell the person that asked this question is like, don't lose your passion for your niche. I think there's pretty much a market for everybody's niche, especially in today's world with, Instagram, and not only social media, but with email campaigns and websites. I mean, you can really have a career based on something very specific, but you have to understand, your own cash flow about it. And you really have to understand what your goal and what your growth model is, because sometimes a niche can really be limiting. If you only build modern homes, then obviously if you're in a very traditional market, you are not going to get very much work. However, if you are the only one that really does modern homes and you really become known for it, now everyone gravitates you. So it's kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy. I've met architects before, not very many, but a few, that they only do one style, but they kind of become iconic. Like that's their style. And it'd be really fascinating to have them on the podcast and just ask them how and when they decided that their niche was so singular. Actually, it makes me want to do that. So shout out to this person's question, because now I'm going to go find an architect that I'm thinking about in my mind here, have them on the podcast and ask them how they would answer this question. So anyway, hopefully this was a helpful, shorter Q&A session today. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time. We're happy to announce that on August 1st, Mark Williams Custom Homes and the Joy Collaborative are holding a charitable event at one of our past builds on Medicine Lake. If you're interested in raising money to help out children with disabilities, there's over 66,000 kids in need in Minnesota alone. We'd love for you to attend. Details can be found on our website, thecuriousbuilderpodcast.com, or any of our social channels. We hope to see you there. Additionally, if you want to hear more about the Joy Collaborative, please listen to episode 34 on the Curious Builder Podcast. We're excited to announce that we've opened up another Curious Collective. For the last year, we've had the Curious Builder Collective. We now have the Curious Builder Collective for designers. The first ones will be happening in September. All the details are going to be on our website. We have 30 spots available. Half of them have already filled. We additionally have 8 spots left in the Builder Collective. If you're interested in getting together in small groups of 9 with local Minneapolis-based builders and designers in separate groups, and talking about your business, talking about your brands, asking those questions that you wish you could ask another business owner, then this is the place for you. Details can be found at thecuriousbuilderpodcast.com. Thanks for listening to the Curious Builder Podcast. If you like what you listen to, please give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It really means a lot. It's a great way for us to just understand what you like about the podcast and what we can keep doing. So like and review, and please share with your friends and family. Find out more at CuriousBuilderPodcast.com.